We're recording. You may be alive now, Bryan. No, I can't hear you. You're muted.
I'm muted. That's why you can't hear me, because I'm muted.
Yeah. It's true.
Oh, Robert was just here. There he is. Robert.
Howdy.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing phenomenal. How are you guys doing? Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh my God, thank you so much. Oh, it's been a long time. It's great to hear your voice.
Yeah, likewise.
So, but Robert, I don't know if you're a frequent listener or not, and it's okay. You don't have to answer that question. It's very important to our listenership that we not rush right into the topic. So really, people have really come to value the banter at the top of the podcast. Actually, I think that people just like assume they're going to fast forward over ads. This is like, look, it doesn't have ads, but it just has this kind of like garbage at the beginning. Yeah. You have to, and anyway, I would also. So, Robert, one of the things we've done is there's a little chime that rings, although you will not hear it here. Whenever we reference a previous podcast episode, something we started doing recently. And Adam, you would be right to think when you say we've started doing it, you're talking about like I am the one that's pouring over my hands and knees over the recording.
No, that is a we thing. I mean, it was your idea, and I think you cribbed it from the changelog.
From the changelog,
I feel good about we there. That's fine.
Okay, so because I was listening to last week's episode, I noticed that do you know what this is about?
No, I don't, but I did ring the bell quite a bit.
We rang the bell quite a bit. I mentioned an episode and no chime rang. Oh. And I'm like, oh, we and I'm like, okay, I get it. Like I'm getting it. I just thought like you'd missed one. That makes sense. And then we had Dave on, Dave Pacheco. Robert, you've our our shared former colleague, Robert and Dave worked very closely together at Joyent.
Way back.
And then Dave mentioned the same episode and the chime did ring. And I'm like, wait a minute. This is like but then I'm like, you know what? I get it. Like I need I need to be like the chime does not always, do not ask for whom the chime tolls.
That's right. Look, so we chimed the chime. That's the important thing.
We chime the chime. Does the chime always get? No, the chime doesn't always get chimed. It is that there's an element of the supernatural in the chime that I really that
sounds right.
Yeah. That I've really come to like. And Robert, the chime you should know is the sound of a Mac SE booting. Is that
Mac
correct?
Plus, excuse me, Mac Plus.
Mac Plus. I am sorry. I'm sure being lit up on the internet. How dare you confuse, sir, a Mac SE with a Mac Plus?
Is it the same? I think they might be the same chime. That one people definitely light me up.
But it no longer can be confused with the emergency broadcast system, which is what it definitely sounded like. I think the first as the chime was getting its legs underneath
it.
Right.
That's right.
But some people are kind of complaining about the chime, and I would like to say we are the only thing on the internet that has no ads associated with it. I'd just like to say that. Unless you this entire thing is one big ad, which is not wrong, but in which case, like,
conversely, these are hour and a half long ads.
It's like you guys are bragging about the fact that your ad does not have ads. Like,
we're watching the Home Shopping Network. Okay, like what?
I'm saying there's no crass commercialism on the Home Shopping Network. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Anyway, I think the chime has been delightful. That was a great conversation last week. So, Robert, we had Dave on and talking. Actually, we were talking about Kang from Manta Days, which you may remember from your time at Joyent.
That feels like another lifetime ago almost.
It does feel like another lifetime ago. I know it was a while ago at this point, which is somewhat. It was a while ago, but. Okay, so we were talking about today. So I had, and Adam, I think I had warned you that I had this blog entry was burning within me. That at some point I was going to really need to get this whole thing out there.
No. I definitely had fair warning on this. Kind of brought us all inside the editing process. Your back and forth with your pal ChatGPT. Yeah, no, I knew this was brilliant.
Well, look, and Google Gemini, I will have you know, I've got two friends.
Wow,
ChatGPT is not my only friend. I also this was many years in the making. My son's a college baseball player, and I his odyssey is so uncannily like raising around that I had to get the parallels out there at the raising around of venture capital, and in ways like good and bad, I guess. Mainly, I don't know, bad. I don't even know if it actually is good or bad, or just like is it? Okay, here's actually just a meta question for you, because Adam, you've raised venture capital.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, first of all, am I wrong that this is an unusual human experience in terms of like ups and downs? Right.
Yeah, 100%. And
on that one.
And I was only, I feel like a bystander to a bystander, like, kind of experiencing your son's experience of college baseball, third hand, I guess. But yeah, the parallels I think are striking, and it did make me wonder, how many, high talent pool, right? You assume that founders are highly talented, or at least unusual, and not that many opportunities, just like not that many college baseball teams in Division I, not that many venture firms, not that much money. I mean, there's a ton of money,
Ultimately.
but like, ultimately not much per aspiring acquirer of said money. So yeah, it seems like a really unusual phenomenon and an interesting kind of class of problems. So the connection I thought was really interesting.
Well, and then that you begin to wonder, like, how many other things are like this?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. Oh, so Robert, you obviously saw this piece last night, and when you left a comment, and I'm like, God, I almost like, of course, like Robert's got the perfect perspective on this, because I was trying to think of people that have truly lived in both worlds. And I would only give myself kind of, a third credit for, it's my son who's the college baseball player, not me. But Robert, you've truly lived in both worlds. So would you mind telling, I have retold your story many times over the years, and I'm sure that details are becoming incorrect in my retelling, but would you mind telling your own story with respect to how you got to Texas on an NCAA championship swim team?
Yeah, it's kind of a Cinderella story, really. To be honest, it was it's so swimming for Texas was kind of always a dream of mine, even as a kid. And although wasn't nearly as easy to get a hold of coaches back then, like I think email was sort of like was mainstream used, like maybe
right.
towards the late 90s, which was around the time I was applying for college. And I just said, I'd actually reached out to a number of other Division I programs, and nobody had any interest in talking to me.
And so you were like a junior in high school at this point, and you're a swimmer and a junior in high school, something like that, senior in high school?
I was a senior. Yeah. Back then, NCAA rules forbid coaches from having contact with athletes as a junior. There was a special day that happened in the fall, and from that point forward, you could have a conversation. But anything before that, NCAA forbid it. Back then, we used to call them the National Confederacy Against Athletes.
Great.
So many restrictive rules. Yeah. And, in my case, I was slower than a number of my peers, but I just said, just shoot your shot, email this guy anyway. And I grew up in Colorado Springs, which was the last place that my dad was stationed before he retired. He was in the Marine Corps. And, this guy emailed me back and said, the head coach at Texas, named Eddie Reese. And he did answer me. And he said, well, I come up there regularly for business trips to the Olympic Training Center, which was headquartered in Colorado Springs. So he said, when's your next dual meet? I'll just show up and watch it.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah. And so we did. And he did show up as promised. And he offered me a scholarship and a spot on the team pretty much like on the spot. And then said, you could take a recruiting chip if you want, but it's more for you to see whether or not this is what you really want to do. And, I've been in conversations with other, like some D2 and D3 programs, and a lot of them said, by the way, this goes back to your point about go somewhere where you're wanted, but also go somewhere where your goals and objectives align with, theirs. And a lot of other coaches tried to talk me out of committing to Texas, and they said, oh, "Man, you don't want to go there. Like, you probably wanted to make the travel team. Like, well, why do you want to be a small fish in a big pond? Like, these guys win the national championship every year. What's the likelihood of you actually making a relay? What's the likelihood of you traveling and all these things? Like, come to our school instead." And I said, I just want to see how good I'm going to be, regardless. Like, for me, it wasn't about being the best. It was about going somewhere where I basically ended my collegiate career without any potential remaining. And that was one of the things Eddie used to always say, is that, at the end of the day, potential is the worst thing to still have. And yeah, he had a lot of those really deep proverbs that he ingrained in us over the years. But so that was sort of how I ended up.
And hadn't you improved quite a bit your senior year in high school? Or am I remembering that correctly?
You are. Yes, you are remembering that very well, actually. So like as a junior, I hadn't even qualified for state, but within about 18 months, I had gone from like qualifying for like state championship in my event. I got second once I got there. And then I qualified for junior nationals in that same year, which is like it's like a US nationals for anyone who's 18 and under. And I went to junior nationals, which was in Clovis that summer, and I won it. I won the 50 and ended up with like a top 16 ranking. But that was just after I had already signed to Texas.
But so just to take that apart. So you went from not qualifying for the state meet in the 50 free presumably,
yep,
to winning junior nationals in 18 months. I mean, that is, man, when the puberty train was obviously like a little behind schedule, but when that thing showed up, it was obviously a loaded freight. I mean, that is just, I mean, that is talk about like late development. Were you surprising even yourself with that?
100%. Like a lot of people were trying to come up with explanations for why this was happening around me, and I got accused of like taking performance enhancing drugs and things like that. And to be honest, I was flattered because I just thought, wow. So if I'm understanding this right, you can't believe it either. Okay, cool. That's both of us.
Oh my gosh. And I assume this is like when, I mean, obviously like people at that age are still, there's so much physical development going on. I mean, it's kind of like 18 is such an arbitrary line in the sand to draw. And it's actually not unrelated to kind of the theme of the piece, is that like there are plenty of people that are physically developing past 18.
Oh yeah. Yes. And in this case, in our case, like this particular coach, Eddie, he actually preferred those guys. So he would go out. I mean, he had a big budget, and he would go out and get a couple of rock stars, guys that he knew would immediately contribute. Like day one, they're going to make NC2As and they're probably going to final, if not win it. But then he, with about 25% left over, he always bought what I used to call penny stocks, or he took in guys like me that no one had ever heard of. And man, I'm telling you, like his ability to see what somebody's capable of was eerie, bordering on the biblical. Really, is almost like he could see into the future. And I mean, he said that he made a number of bold claims when he recruited me that I didn't even believe myself, and every single one of them turned out to be true. And that was fighting against him the whole way too. And he was still right. I mean, he said some really strange things that were really hard to believe, but yeah, he was. And I think that that's really where, what made him different than a lot of coaches, and why he won so many years in a row, was because he could see beyond what's on paper and beyond what's necessarily in front of him. That's a tough thing to do, to recruit based on perceived potential, but he could do it. He was one of the few, I think.
And what were the kinds of things that he was seeing? Were they purely kind of mechanical? Were they character? I mean, what is he seeing?
That's a good question. So a couple of things he had told. The number one was, he said there was a condition that he had proposed. Like he said, you have a spot on the team, spot on the roster. I'm going to guarantee that on one condition, and that is you have to redshirt your freshman year because you need to gain some weight. So yeah, I think at the time I was. You ever heard that? What's the name of that song by Santana? Like, I ain't got nobody. You know which one I'm talking about? It's an old song. And he had said when he hears that song, he thinks of me, except it's I ain't got no body. Like, and so
and you want me on the team? Okay, I mean this is
Hey, because our listeners may not be college sports fans, you want to talk about what redshirting means?
Yeah, so redshirting essentially means like so the NC2A says you get 4 years of eligibility where you can compete for the team in NC2A sanctioned events. But if you take a redshirt year, it's essentially where you're allowed to be on the team, you're allowed to train with the team, and you get a scholarship like anyone else on the team would get. You just aren't allowed to compete. And so it allows you basically a 5th year. So for me, my real freshman year of competing was actually my 2nd year at Texas, not my first. That's a tough year though, because you don't travel. When dual meets are at home, you're not competing with the rest of the team. You're sitting there watching, and then you have to race exhibition during like a diving break. So usually there's like a number of events that take place, and then they go to diving, and that lasts about 30 minutes, and then they'll come back and do a few more events, and then like one more diving break, and then a relay at the end, and it's over. And so I had to race during the diving break, and sadly, this to make matters even worse, in my freshman year, I was kind of in a pool by myself during the race, and once in a while, there were a few postgraduates that stuck around on the women's team, and sometimes like that's who I would race was
just
was the
whoever
girls.
Drifting around on the deck who was like, yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And during that redshirt year, and you kind of did mention this in your reply to my post, like that redshirt year, it was like psychologically really tough. It sounds like.
Oh, really tough. You just wanted to be a part of the team, and you felt like you weren't. You felt like you were sitting out while these guys were actually doing the heavy lifting and it was tough, especially at home when all of your friends and the fans and stuff show up and the stands are packed and you're sitting there dry, or you're getting ready for your time trial that's in a pool by yourself, so you didn't get anyone to race. It can be a drag, and when you start to get down, when I started to get down about things like that, I just had to think to myself, like, why am I? The reason I'm doing this is because this is supposedly going to lead to something really amazing if I stay the course, and I had to stay focused on that and kind of forget about how much this sucks right now, and let that motivate me instead. And that's kind of how I got through it. I saw a lot of people.
Did you have self-doubt during that year?
Oh yeah, I mean, for sure. I think for me, the biggest problem was that I kind of felt like I was at a place I didn't belong. That's how it felt. It wasn't necessary.
Right.
It's tough, especially when you actually when you think you're really good, because where I came from, I was the best. But then, of course, you get on a team like that, and everybody was the best where they came from.
Yeah.
And oftentimes those guys are better than me. I mean, in my class alone, I want to say there were 6 guys in my class. I want to say 4 of them actually the Olympics.
Yeah.
So it was really competitive. Yeah, it was really competitive. Yeah, lots of doubt. I don't know.
My son redshirted and of his own volition, but for similar reasons. Like I know I need to get bigger, and like I just need if I can just hang out a little bit longer. I know the puberty train is still coming, still
100%.
And I mean, I didn't really take it apart with him about any. He didn't have. I mean, if he had self-doubt, he wasn't. He talking about it with Dad was not on the agenda. But I think I really did. I mean, admired it when he made the decision because it required this really. I mean, you on the one hand, your identity is very much a part of being on this team, being an athlete on this team. And you're like, by a real definition, like not like, you are.
That's how it feels. Precisely.
Yeah.
And that takes immense, in my opinion, especially for your son to make a decision like that unilaterally, like without somebody trying to talk him into it. That is just, that's actually
they tried to talk him out of it. They tried to talk him out of it actually, because they needed him that season. He's a lefty pitcher.
Wow.
And, but he had already done the calculus that like, I've got to get bigger.
Okay, your son is special, extraordinarily special. To be able to do something like that without being told, or I mean, because really, Eddie would say all 18-year-old boys should redshirt. He wish he could redshirt from all.
Yeah. Yeah, he was, I mean, just to give you some perspective, so he was a graduate when he was first starting in junior college. I was looking at the roster and it had him listed as 6'2", 170. And wow. I told him, I'm like, Tobin, this is a really bad habit to get into, because you and I both know, like, you're not 170, like you're 150. And
that's what I was too. Yeah.
And he's like, Dad, that's what I told him. I said, I'm 150. And the coach said, I ain't putting that. I'm putting 170. So I'm like, oh, okay. I guess he didn't want you to be publicly humiliated by your weight, I guess. I'm not sure where to go on that one. But
so it sounds like he's got the Santana song as his theme too.
100%. Yeah. I mean, he was, 150 soaking wet.
Yep.
And he told me, this is like, you kind of look back as a parent, because like I would like to believe I've been really supportive, but I think along the way, I probably have snickered along the way in ways that have been, but he's like, I'm going to be 195 pounds. And I'm like, I mean, not with my DNA on board, you're not, but he's, that's what he's done. He's 190, he's 6'4", 190, but he knew that his body needed to develop, but I think it's really hard. It must be very hard to both be waiting on that, but then also you got to be working incredibly hard that year to get yourself kind of physically ready.
Oh yeah. Especially like you said, late on the puberty train, you can see, like I, for example, always could see this obvious strength disparity between me and my teammates. And so I did a lot. I did a lot to try and close that gap. I felt like I had to do more than them because I was behind. So I was eating a lot and I was lifting a lot, just working as hard as I possibly could. And I was doing CS at the time. So there was just no time for fun.
I mean, truly, I think like truly very few people understand. I mean, so you were at the University of Texas, which is the top swimming program in the country, also a top computer science program in the country. I mean, it is exceedingly hard to do both of these things.
I felt like it was, yeah.
I mean, it must have been like every waking second is swimming or your academics. It must have been.
100%. And that got tough too, because it was just yet one more way in which I was like a little different than my teammates. A lot of these guys, right. I mean, the athletic department, which is the other thing that you have to be careful of when you're a student athlete, is their goal is really to keep you eligible to compete. And, as far as what you study, it's not really their concern or that big of a deal. And so I saw them push a lot of my teammates into degrees that were just easy. So like after practice, so like a typical day for me looked like this. It was like, you get up at 6, get to the pool by 6:30, and from 6:30 to 8, I'm training, I'm swimming. And then, I have enough time to go by and grab some food at the dining hall. My first class is at 9. I'm at class up until about 2 p.m. And then I go to the room for an hour. And then at 3 p.m., from 3 to 5, I'm swimming again. After swimming, everybody, they leave the pool. We all go to the dining hall. And then after that, they go to sleep or take a nap. I went to the double E lab. So,
oh man.
Yeah. And there were times when I was there, honestly, there were times I was there all night and I would just grab my books and walk to the pool in the morning. There weren't many of those, but it did happen and it sucked.
I mean, to the degree that this was barely possible when you did it, do you think this is still possible today?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, well, it depends. Okay.
Looking at the demands on these athletes, I'm like, I don't understand how you do this and something that is academically really demanding. Like, I don't understand how you did it like in my day, let alone. No, I think that the time demand seems to have only grown.
Yeah, if I had. Okay, you want the brutal, honest truth? I'll tell you how you do it. You do it by getting a lot of B- and C+. That's how.
Yeah.
That's the truth. I mean, it's tough,
right.
But you just don't give up. It takes freaking tenacity, just being unwilling to give up. And the other thing is, like, for me, I never really I tried not to think about the very, very end during those times. It was usually just like one foot in front of the other, because if I tried to look at, you've heard people talk about like summiting K2. They almost say, like, when you get to that part where that bottleneck is, it's almost like that you see a mountain on top of a mountain and you're like, holy crap, I thought I was getting close, but now I've got it could be really demoralizing. So sometimes it was just, you know what, get to tomorrow, get to the next exam, get to the next swim meet, worry about things after that. Yeah. And that's pretty much how it went for a while. But, you do adjust. It's crazy. You do adjust. You start to get more stamina. Your body gets kind of used to some of these things. Lack of sleep for me was always that's my Achilles heel. So no matter what, I always tried to get at least 7 hours. Sometimes I got more, sometimes I got less, but sleep is huge. I'd say that's the big thing. You have to
right. Because it's like sleep is so important for athletes.
That's everything.
And like, that's the part that is, you kind of, even if you're a non-athlete in a really demanding academic program, sleep is often the thing that gets tossed out. And then, which has been outrageously challenging. Tell me about, in terms of the progression of your collegiate career, because then you have your redshirt year, but then you are swimming on that team as they are winning national championships.
That was, so at the end of my freshman year, I still got a chance to shave and race. Shaving is something that we do in swimming. There was a period where we had these full body suits, and so shaving wasn't quite as important then. And by the way, just to let everyone in on a little swimming terminology, when I say shave, what I really mean is shave and rest for about 4 or 5 weeks. Like, when someone says, in the swimming world, someone says, oh, they were shaved, what that really means is they were tapered and fully rested for a good 5 weeks. And they also happened to shave their legs. But that's the shave is really, like, honestly, it's the least important part of the whole process. Maybe it cultivates a little more feeling in the water, but it's the 5 weeks of rest.
And what's kind of going on from a muscle perspective there? I mean, what's the why does one
healing? Yeah, because so like, we did a lot of heavy yardage, and maybe some of that's changed since then, but we were like, there were days when I would swim, say, 4,000 yards in the morning and then another 7,000 at night. And during the summer, it was even worse. Sometimes we do 10,000 in the morning and 10,000 at night. But that, as a sprinter, that just totally destroys your fast twitch muscle.
Yeah, so you're a sprinter. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, at least for me, during the resting phase, there's a part where at first he takes you off of morning practices, so you're not doing that anymore. You're only swimming in the afternoons, and he starts to drop the yardage down. And the kinds of things that you do are only things that are really short and fast. And you start to, it's funny, at first you're like, your body's like, oh man, like, I'm starting to feel like I'm coming to life again. I've been feeling like I'm dead this whole time. And then you feel really good. And then next thing you know, for whatever reason, I can't explain why, you feel really terrible. I think there's something going on there metabolically that, is confusing your body. And so, like, maybe your nervous system is really confused for a while because you're not taking this beating. And so you kind of, you perform worse. And then, but if you can you stay the course, a couple of weeks later, you usually come out of it. Man, that feeling, it's like when you take a stroke, it's like your arm is cutting through air. It doesn't even feel like water. It feels so thin, it feels so easy to manipulate. And you just have endurance for days. And so the theory, Eddie, the whole point behind that was Eddie used to always say that a lot of our competitors, they would basically taper twice a year. They would taper for a swim meet in December, and their goal would be to qualify for NC2As then, and then continue training and then rest for NC2As. We didn't do that. Eddie he would just say, we're not shaving in the middle of the season. We're going to just work right through. And the reason why is he said, like, the longer the season is where you work like that, the longer you can rest without getting out of shape. And so we did see that a lot. Like, a lot of our competition showed up to NC2As and, like, a little bit out of shape. And some of them didn't even repeat the times that got them there, which was interesting.
And so, you are swimming because you're swimming, like, on those teams that won, like, back-to-back national championships, right?
Yeah, I was on 3 of them.
Wow. I mean, that must have been extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, each one sort of represents something different, like kind of special. And like the first NC2As I ever went to, and I don't know why they don't do this anymore, but like every time, like if it's the year before an Olympic year, they used to host the meet in meters as opposed to yards. Meters is cool because that's recognized internationally.
What a compromised position. What a terrible compromised position. Like, look, we can't agree whether it should be meters and yards. So we'll be in meters once every 4 years.
Yeah, I didn't have any complaints, to be honest. But it was funny because it was short course meters. So it was a 25-meter pool, which is recognized internationally. Like you go to another country, they've got 25-meter pools there. In fact, even some years World Championships is conducted in short course meters. But the reason why they did this was because it was a course that's not competed like super often. And so if you've got a bunch of college guys, especially like in their prime, that are all resting and shaving for a meet like that, you're almost guaranteed to see world records fall. And if you do, it just brings a lot of attention to the sport, particularly in an Olympic year, which is good. And I think that's one of the reasons why they did it. But like, so my first NC2A was in 2000. It was the first time I had made the meet. And I was on a relay. This is kind of funny. I was on a relay that year that broke the world record. And when it happened, I didn't even know it. So like, and it was in the morning too. It wasn't even in finals at night. And, swimming in the warm down pool, and one of my teammates stops me and says, "Hey, nice American record." And I said, "Get out of here. We didn't break the American record. We did not." And he said, yeah, we did. And so we get back to, where our bags are in the stands, and I'm packing up, and Eddie says, "That wasn't the American record. That was the world record." And I really thought that they were joking, because I hadn't, back then it's not like you could pull out your phone, open Safari and do a quick search. You just didn't know. Right. So I'm like, for me, when I finally believed that they were telling me the truth was when I turned around and there were like 3 guys wearing all white outfits, which was like, they were like officials with a cup in their hand. And, but 4 of them, 1 for each guy on the relay. And they said, "Come with us to the bathroom." And
for a drug test.
Oh yeah.
So this is how you've broken the world record, is because they show up for a drug test.
Wow.
Yeah, this is why I finally believed them, because like I said, it just wasn't that easy to figure out back then. I wasn't paying attention. I was just trying to swim fast. That's it. So
I will acknowledge that in my analogy of NCAA athletics and venture capital, don't really know what the analogy is for this one. Not really sure.
For the drug test. Yeah. It's not like you have the biggest IPO ever. They're like, "All right, Zuck."
All right. You only know because they show up asking you to pee in the cup. Yeah, don't really know what that one is.
A little bit, yeah, but it was a very strange circumstance, and one of the reasons why so I should probably add a little color to this, because this part of the story, because it is hard to believe, and there's a reason why, and that was because UC Berkeley spanked us in that relay that morning. But the reason why they didn't get either American or world record was because, number one, their relay had some people on it that weren't American, and number two, this is an interesting statistic. I didn't know this, but in order for a relay to be eligible for the world record, all 4 guys have to swim under the same flag. And so ours, we had like 4 Americans and no other relay. Can you believe this? No other relay at the meet had 4 guys from the same country.
Wow. That's funny.
Yeah. Crazy.
That's extraordinary. So then so that is and you said that's in 2000. That's in your first NCAA championship.
Right.
So you could hold the world record and potentially lose the meet at the same time. That'd be exciting.
100%. Yep. You could. Yep.
I really thought when you said that the people came to present you with the cup, I really thought it was like a trophy cup.
like the Stanley Cup. Yeah.
You're like, "Oh, thank you for this." It's a little bit like I'm a little bit plastic, but it's,
like
it's
you're all
marked milliliters here.
You're all going to have an opportunity to drag it around the rest of the meet. Different cup.
No, I don't know what they took it, tested it, presumably, And they were pretty serious about it. It wasn't one of these things where it was like go in the stall and come back out with a full cup. Like they're like, we need to make sure that the urine is coming from where it's supposed to. So they watched closely with a watchful eye.
Wow.
It's
and
a little bit
success,
troubling.
I infer.
Yeah,
You peed from the right orifice, I guess. That didn't come out your ear.
No.
I mean,
more details. Right. I need. You're leaving
I
too much to the
personally,
imagination, Robert.
listen, this is the podcast that talks about the two-headed shower. Okay, so we're going to go there. This is what
It's true. It's true.
I personally, for whatever reason, I think I was still. My mind was still on the race that had happened, and for me, stage fright just wasn't the problem. I just wasn't even thinking. I mean, those guys almost, even though they were standing there watching, for me, they weren't even in the room. I was still kind of trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. But yeah, the other guys in the relay were like, I don't know about this. They were in there a lot longer than me.
Just say world record on the relay. Also won the relay in terms of peeing the fastest. So just like, please put another note on there.
Immune to stage fright.
Right. There you go. But I mean, wild for, and to how, because this is the thing that I think is so, and this is where you do get to the analog of kind of starting a company as well, in terms of like, because the highs have to be higher than the lows are low, or you'd stop doing it. And
I think so.
I mean,
yeah.
Like obviously for all of the low lows that you must have endured to get to that point, I mean, that's obviously a very high. And I mean, do you find that kind of thing just informed the way you thought of yourself? I mean, so when you come to Texas, Eddie Reese sees something that you don't see in yourself, but fast forward only a couple of years and you've got, you're setting the record for being in the cup. Are you, I mean, at that point, I mean, you must think like, God, anything's possible.
Yeah. You kind of feel that way. You start to, you kind of do feel that way. I mean, it's funny. Like that was, and by the way, Eddie predicted that, which is one of the things I was going to get to, was that when I first set foot on campus and he talked about what his plans were for me, this was one of them. He's like, in 3 years, this meet's going to be conducted, short course meters. I plan on breaking the world record and using you to do it. And I'm like, get out of here. Come on. He's insane. And that was only one of his predictions. And there was another one that was, in my opinion, just as bold, if not more, and which came true. And at the end, and it's funny, I always, when I told Eddie, I saw him like in an alumni event a few years ago. I said, Eddie, when I was 18, I thought you were crazy. And, I said, I got about halfway through swimming at Texas, not even all the way through, halfway through. And I said, okay, I think he might be right about some things, maybe some things. And I said, and then by the time I had already graduated, I realized you were right about most things. And then I said, and I thought that was it. I thought that was the end of the epiphany. And I said, but then there were two more. I realized you're actually right about everything. And then the final one I had was just, God, I'm embarrassed. And,
wow.
And he said, he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, Robert, I hate to break it to you, but there is one more level left for you. And I said, which one is that? And he goes, it's the one where you forgive yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, what a singular person. So other than predicting that 25 years into the future, you would be on a nerd podcast, what other predictions did he make?
The big one was, and I don't know why, I really don't know why he was so serious about this one, but he said, I didn't just recruit you to be a part of a relay. He said, you're going to final at NC. He's going to make the A final at NC2As, the top 8 in the 50. And he said that one to me before we even started practicing. Like before, it was like I was on campus. We hadn't even dove into the pool yet. And he said, you're going to final at NC2As. And that was something he said for 5 years. As a matter of fact, he used to always say, he would always tell people, like in these team meetings we'd have, he said, someone in here is going to make the A final. So the way it works, by the way, is like they take the top 35 or 6 guys in the country in a given event and they race them all in the morning. and they take the people who placed at the top 16 that morning and they swim them that night. And there's two heats. There's the A final, which is places 1 through 8. And then there's the B final, which is places 9 through 16. If you get 8th in the morning, it doesn't matter how slow you go at night, you're 8th. Like, there's nothing those guys that were in the B final can do. They should have showed up in the morning. That's their problem, which is why Eddie always says that in C2As, it's won and lost in the morning, really, not at night. But he used to always say, somebody in this room is going to make the A final. And I guarantee you, it's going to be someone that no one has ever heard of before. And it's going to happen when no one expects it. And in fact, we had team T-shirts that made that year that said John Doe on the back because, it's going to be a nobody that does it. And I turned out to be that nobody, I guess. It's a little too weird, the way it worked out. So, I think for me, like I said, I'd been a part of 3 teams. But for me, what kind of always bothered me was that I'd never scored points individually on my own. I was always on a relay. I mean, it's just a really fast meet, top to bottom. I would say, I'd say probably it's the fastest meet in the world, even. And so, but I just, for whatever reason, I to really prove it to myself that I belonged here, I wanted to make the A final, which I mean, any final really. And that was, by the way, that was weird the way that happened too, because I went in to that meet seated like 30th. Like I was, they load. So each heat has 8 lanes, 8 people. And the way it works is they load them full from the top down. So, if you have a number of people competing that's not a multiple of 8, it's always going to be heat 1 that doesn't fill up all of the lanes, right? And so I swam in that first heat, and it was like one of these heats that had like 3 or 4 people in it. I kind of call it the sympathy heat. Like nobody expects them to score, but everybody claps for you when it's over. And then I ended up just torching my heat. And I'm sitting there with a friend of mine, and we're like watching the rest of these heats finish like in the stands. And it's like, okay, heat 2 happened. Nobody beat me. Heat 3 has gone. Nobody beat me. Heat 4, 5. And suddenly my friend says, look, man, you're ranked number 1 and there are 2 heats left. Unless all 8 guys in both heats beat you, you're coming back tonight. Which
you're
I couldn't believe.
At least the B finals. Yeah. Wow.
At least bare minimum. And then in the next heat, only like maybe 2 people beat me. And he said, oh my God, I can't believe this guy might A final. I still can't believe it, to be honest. I'm like, did this really happen?
Did you have kind of a chip on your shoulder when you were, or was it self-belief when you are, because you're obviously swimming beyond your seating there for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh man, I was shocked. So I don't know if you guys follow the Olympics over the last few years, like 2016, 2020, or if 2021 was it? Anyway, there was a guy in 2016, American guy. His name is Anthony Irvin. He swam for Cal. He's my age actually. He somehow he made the Olympics in 2016 and he won gold in the 50. And this guy he's interesting. And he also won gold in Sydney in 2000 in the 50. And between those 2 Olympics, he disappeared.
Wow.
This guy was probably the most talented swimmer I've ever met in my life, or Anthony Irvin. And I went into NC2As that last year thinking to myself, like, okay, I hadn't swam well leading up to this point, so I didn't expect to do very well. But he led me off the relay for whatever reason. He decided to lead me off the relay that morning, and I have this thing, chip on your shoulder or expectations, confidence, all to put things in perspective. I decided the night before to not even look at the psych sheet. So I had no idea, when I got up there the next day, who was even going to be next to me. I had no clue. It was irrelevant. That's the way I saw it.
Yeah.
So I go first. I'm coming off the wall at the 25. So I'm on my way back, and I could see out of my peripheral vision that whoever it is that's next to me is demolishing me. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, well, this is about what I expected. But seriously, this was the negative thought that went through my head briefly, And when I get to the wall, first thing I do is like, okay, let's see what I went. What's the damage? And I had a best time. Like, you know, it was my second time under 20 seconds for a 50 in my life. And and in particular, it was the best time. I said, whoa, like that's really fast. I said, who the hell just destroyed me? And then when I saw Irvin on the cap, I said, oh, okay, that makes sense. I was so relieved. You know, and it was almost like I needed that. And then I said, okay, you know what? I'm in this meet after all. Like I'm here.
Yeah, interesting. Like actually, the fact that like the guy that just beat me is just extraordinary swimmer. I belong here at some level. I can compete.
Yeah, and that's when I realized. That's when I started swimming at the rest of the meet with a bit more conviction. Like, okay, yeah, I meant to do that, but it's like, okay, so what happened? What happened? Like, I look back on that all the time and ask myself, well, what happened there? What made that swim different, despite the fact that my attitude wasn't like that great going into it? And here's what I think it comes down to: the one thing I learned from it was because I had no expectations. I didn't expect. I figured this is my last, collegiate meet. I had no expectations, and I wasn't doing well before that, so I just let go. I slept like a baby the night before. I just didn't care. Almost didn't care. I had to almost insulate myself from expectations and potential disappointment. And it was the best I'd ever slept before a race in my life. And I woke up the next morning feeling like really good. So I think there's a lesson there. I mean, I think it's possible to try too hard. I don't know if that's a lot of people's problems, but it was mine. And I almost felt free to race, without any expectations.
Yeah, well, there's this whole this aphorism. I actually don't know who it's. I mean, I thought it was Eleanor Roosevelt, but I actually don't think it is. What would you do if you were unafraid of failing? And it's like you were completely losing the fear of failure.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
It is. I do think it's a game changer. I mean, I think it's like. I mean, honestly, like that was very important for us in starting Oxide. Was just like I was. When we were kind of first conceiving of, and long before we had a name, the ideas that we had were all very small ball ideas. And it was I think I'm too fixated on like not failing.
Yep.
And Adam's like, wait a minute, where do I work again? So what are we doing? Sorry. Is this supposed to be inspiring? Because this is like, you're doing that thing where you do the opposite again. Where you like, all right, why? Maybe I need to maybe that's the wrong rubric here. And I think it's actually been like one of the things, like this is why I keep like a lot of my thoughts to myself or to the internet here via the podcast, but just between you and me, internet, I would have my own thoughts on my son playing baseball. And I learned to just like keep them to myself because I was like mentally optimizing for reducing likelihood of failure. And the guy's a pitcher. It's all about failure. It's like you're never even going to go to the mound if you are optimizing for minimizing failure. And you need to like be in a very different mindset. So it's interesting that you raced the best when you were just like released from the fear of failure.
Yeah, it's huge. It's everything, especially like in something like swimming. And I can equally imagine in pitching too. Like I mean, yes, you need some amount of strength, but there's some finesse required, right? Like there's points where you do have to be relaxed to really fling that ball and release it at just the right moment. And that's hard to do when you're all tense.
And it is very, very, very psychological in terms of like you need to be, and this is, I mean, where I just like got total respect for it. I mean, I just think so much of it is not allowing, kind of keeping yourself calm when, you've got plenty of reasons for alarm. And I just think there's so much kind of to that. So did you find, I mean, as you kind of so you have this, I mean, just as you say, Cinderella athletic career, and then go into your engineering career. How often did you find you were kind of tapping back into some of that same metal?
Oh man, all the time, and not just like, and not just in other areas, but even back. So like when I was at Sun, like when I was at Sun, I actually I hadn't swam for a couple of years at that point, and part of me was just curious if I could still do it. And at the time, I think I was at Broomfield. I was working for Scott Tracy. I don't remember Scott.
Yeah,
I was like
sure.
The Fiber Channel team, and I just got kind of bored, and I said, I wonder if I could make Olympic trials again. I just wonder if I could, like, swimming 5 days a week, and I just did it.
And this was in this 2008, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, you've not been swimming for like years at this point.
Yeah, a few years. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was really surprised that it was still that easy to dial it in. Really surprised, to be honest.
That is amazing. And made it to the Olympic trials?
Yeah. That was my second one. I went in 2000, and then I went in 2008. I didn't go to 04, obviously, because I had to get a job.
Right.
But once I figured out how to balance that, yeah.
And I think, I have been talking, as I recall, like you have beat Michael Phelps in a race. Is that correct? Am I telling that correctly?
Okay, but to be fair, that's my race. Like, that's a 50. So, like, Michael Phelps is extraordinary. I mean, yeah, my 50 is faster than his, but let's be clear. I think if Phelps actually wanted to be good at the 50, I don't think I'd have a chance. Not even a chance. But he had other priorities. He had this. God, that guy swam the 200 freestyle, 200 fly, the 200 IM, 200 back, the 400 IM, the 100 fly.
But not the 50 free. 50 free. He can actually take a seat.
Yeah. He didn't have that fast twitch, but I wouldn't underestimate him if he had put his mind to it. And for him, I think that was more of a, okay, like, I'm bored, I'll just do a 50 at this meet kind of thing. And I have said that, I had the unique privilege of racing guys like him at some of these Grand Prix meets after I graduated college. That was a lot of fun. Those were good times. Yeah.
That's amazing. And then later went on to, you did go actually, because this is what makes you very unusual, is because you've been at that extraordinarily elite level of athletic performance. And then you were also an entrepreneur. You've also raised venture capital, and you've actually been on the other side of the table in terms of raising VCs. You were kind of uniquely qualified to weigh in on this analogy.
That's how it felt, especially when I saw your post. I'm like, man, this guy's talking to my soul. Like, I read every letter of every word, every line. You took me back. I was like, I ran out of characters on LinkedIn to post a reply, so I had to shorten it. But like, I was like, there's a part of me that I had in there. Hey, thank you so much for taking me back to those days, man. That was so much fun to relive that in my mind for a moment. It was fun.
And I'm gonna assume that these are the glory days of swimming, not the glory days of raising VC, which is I don't know, would say less fun. It is actually fun. The highs when you're raising are actually very high.
Oh, very high.
And so, talk about your own odyssey in terms of that. And were you? It's a similar kind of thing in that, like, you're trying to create something out of nothing. People would rightfully dismiss what you're doing as a long shot. And
yeah,
yeah, but were you able to kind of like tap into some of that? Talk about those kind of overlaps.
You're reading my mail, because it's like they always think you're crazy, or that it's a futile effort until it works, and then it's not. And so I've been there before. A lot of people say, oh, like, you won't last at Texas, or a lot of people said, oh, like, nobody improves that much in such a short period of time. That's all you've got. Well, it wasn't all I had. I knew that, but but I was used to hearing these kinds of opinions that kind of underestimate. And I'm not so sure it's really a belief out of people like that. So much of it was a confession. But same thing with the startup. And I'd say, like, in some ways I kind of enjoyed it. And I think that redshirt freshman year, taught me a lot. Most notably, how to wait for gratification, how to do a lot of work without the promise of anything in return. Maybe ever, but definitely right now, you're not getting anything. But the understanding is this is a marathon, and you have to stay the course. You have it, and that was the other thing. Like, my dad would always tell me, you know why you ended up finishing everything you did at Texas was because you're just so damn stubborn. And I never really liked that. I never really liked that kind of an analogy. I mean, it really wasn't stubborn. It was one of these things where I sat down long before any of this got emotional, and I said, and I think that's important to do that before emotions get involved. And I said, look, this is what I want. This is what it's going to take to get it at a minimum. Am I willing to give that in exchange for what I want? And if the answer is yes, then you move forward. If the answer is no, then you don't. And yeah, it got tough while I was in Texas, definitely. Just like it got tough trying to raise money at first. And I of course you're going to want to quit. I mean, I think that goes without saying. I don't know anybody that hasn't been tempted to quit. And I mean, feel free to weigh in. I mean, did doubts ever go through your mind in any of these kinds of ventures that you've done? I think it's natural if they did. If they didn't, it'd be easy. It'd be a lot easier,
Yeah, not doubt really, and maybe this is just where it's just like ill-informed. And it was very, very helpful for me to then superimpose that on my son's experience and his like total conviction, and because he has had absolute conviction in himself when there's like really. There have been plenty of times when there have been very few people that have had conviction in him, and basically it began and ended with him. And my own. I mean, certainty sounds too arrogant, but I don't know. I just got over like what's the worst thing that happens? I guess the fear of failure is not something that I am really. I haven't really felt, but then you have. I mean, which is not to say that it's not extraordinarily difficult, and you just can't take anything for granted. You have to know. I mean, just what you said. It's like about like knowing what you want and knowing what you're willing to do to make it happen.
Yep.
But then very hard for me to kind of look outside. Like, so it's very clear for me in kind of my narrow domain. But then you look at me like, okay, but I don't understand that person. I mean, like that's crazy over there, but it's not. It's just it's someone who's got a different orientation and has got that same level of conviction, and it's extraordinary. I think it's which doesn't mean, I mean, at all. In fact, success is not assured. That's what makes it and I still think that certainly with Oxide, that success is not assured. But I'm not afraid of failure. I'm not sure where that leaves me. I'm not maybe like. Naive. I'm not sure. Like, are you in the cockpit right now? Like, what's going on?
Well, so is that's setting aside a failure, right? Like, so what? Yeah. You're afraid of failure, and then what? Like, what's the consequence of that? Well, the consequence is like you do the same things that you would be doing to offset those chances of failure. So I think that I don't know. I think that with entrepreneurship, with running a company, with constructing a team, all this stuff, like that fear of failure is kind of omnipresent until it's not.
Yeah.
But also not sort of actionable in the moment that I think in athletic pursuits,
right.
It's sort of nipping at your heels much more pervasively.
Yeah. I think that's true. I think also, I don't know, like maybe in entrepreneurship, failure is not necessarily the right word, but I mean, when you first, I mean, I think everybody that's ever left their 9-to-5 gig at a big company to go off and take that, destiny into their own hands, it's, they know that exhilarating feeling. There's very little things that can compare, right? It's fresh, it's exciting, it's electric. And, there comes a time, whether it's because there's internal conflict at the company or it's because you hit some big roadblock that you didn't plan to hit, whatever it might be. And, sometimes these things can drag on. They really test your endurance and your resiliency. And, it's in those moments when, I mean, we're not digital systems. We're all, I don't know, analog at best.
Squishy is Adam's term that I really like. Adam calls you. Were you on the way to Squishy? Is that I would make Adam?
No, you got there first.
What you were going to say, Squishy?
Yeah, of course.
This would make me feel a lot better if because I feel that, you and I have spent so much time together and know one another so well that I was telling your wife a story about myself that I was certain that you yourself had not heard. You came in and heard one syllable, like, I haven't heard the story.
And then spoiled the punchline. Yeah.
And then spoiled the punchline. And I was like, wow. This is wow. Okay. Never mind. I guess I am.
No, Squishy. You got it. A squishy human.
Squishy. All right. Yeah, good. I should have written it down on a piece of paper instead.
And and there's I think it's normal for emotions to get the better of you, and they do cloud your judgment. They it's like, man, this isn't exactly what I thought was going to happen, but is this really what I still want to do, kind of thing. And it's like, well, yeah, I think that's natural. And and as far as carrying things over from swimming to the startup, the endeavor, I'd say one of the big things that, and this, for whatever reason, this is one of the things Eddie used to always say. He would say, it's not adversity by itself that really can discourage you. It's when you experience a type of adversity that wasn't planned for. There's expected adversity, and then there's like bizarre, like I'm talking completely unrelated types of adversity that you almost think you shouldn't have. And he said, those are the ones that really mess with you. That's what really tests you. But if you realize that whatever it is you're experiencing is actually is part of the plan, it is by design. Just knowing that by itself can make it more manageable.
Did his coach? Because you had the really just not really knowing that much about Eddie Reese before this conversation, but this is like, you had the opportunity to have this close relationship with one of the all-time great coaches of any sport, effectively.
Yeah.
How did that inform the way that you lead a team, participate in a team? And are there specific things that you took specifically from that experience or from him?
Yeah, a few things. I think for me, at least, one of the big ones is because I spent a lot of time, especially in the last 2 years, volunteer coaching high school kids. And I always try to look for the ones that, are more like me, the ones that get overlooked by everyone else. And I think one of the big things I learned from watching Eddie do what he does is that greatness can be found in some of the most unlikeliest of places. And look below the surface if you want to find it. It's there, but you have to be willing to look. And so I think that's one of the big things. I would never underestimate a kid that was really hungry, especially one that was really responsive, like your son, right? Like, holy crap. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that an 18-year-old is like, I'm going to redshirt because I need to develop more for a year. Who does that? I mean, that's hard. That's really hard. I probably wouldn't have done it unless someone had made me. That's another level, Bryan. Like that's really impressive.
Yeah, and with that whole path. Because the other thing that I think when you get to this level that I think people don't necessarily realize is like that has to come. That is all him, right? It has to be elective from like the parents can kind of put their thumb on the scale to a point, but boy, that point ends after high school. There's just no way. Like parental and. That is 100% intrinsic motivation. That is just not because it has to be. There's just no way that's going to be.
You can't talk someone into doing that.
No, you
for
can't.
Sure.
You really can't. That's got to, and I think that's also part of the reason. Like you got to, when someone feels that kind of intrinsic motivation, even if it's not, like you do have to kind of get out of the way. I feel, a
little bit.
Which has been, as a parent, has been a big adjustment for me because this is not, as I said in the piece, like this is not what I did. And his path through college looks nothing like my path through college. But in many ways, the commonality is that he and I at age 17, 18 did not want to be told what to do. and had, I mean, like that is the real commonality.
Oh,
That's
how strange. Right.
Yeah. I just,
and as Adam cancels the order for the paternity test.
Yeah, it's
but the specifics are very, very different. And I think that, you've got to, I think this is always, I mean, I think this is like the great thing and the great challenge of parenting is your child is not you. This is like a total newsflash. Is that
newsflash, but like, God, so, I mean, advice that you need to give yourself daily, I feel like in certain phases.
Oh, absolutely.
Of life. Yeah.
Well, I don't. I mean, this is like the complimentary parenting podcast. But I always tell people, like, when you got like a newborn, what do you want for your child? Oh, I want them to be happy and fulfilled. I'm like, okay, write that down on a piece of paper, put it in a drawer where you can find it when they're 18 years old, and the path that they have chosen to be exactly what you want them to be is absolutely not the path that you would choose for them. And because you're going to need to reread that piece of paper. And maybe you get lucky and the path that they'll take is one that's like, oh, this is great. Like, this is one that I recognize, but more likely than not, it's like, no, it's going to be a different path. And you've got to, it can be a real challenge. Yeah. Easier said than done, for sure.
For sure. But for what it's worth, like everything you're saying, I think makes complete sense as far as like how you're supporting your son right now. It's almost one of the things my dad used to always say to me, like much later in my life, was, I came to this realization at some point when you were maybe 17 or 18. Whenever I tried to tell you what to do, you would do the opposite, or at the very least, you wouldn't do what I said. But if I left you alone and gave you the choice, you always did the right thing. And I think I would say, like, if I could use one word to describe like my dad's interaction in my swimming career, particularly in college and later, because I did end up swimming at the national level up till I was like in my early 30s. I would just say he was an enabler. He enabled, but he didn't direct. He didn't really advise. He enabled. He got out of the way. But he's obviously, like, at that point he knew a lot about swimming at that point, so it was easy for him he knew what kinds of things like I needed, what I didn't need. And he didn't always try to give advice. Sometimes you don't need advice. Sometimes just, it was enough to listen. You have a bad race or whatever, you want to vent about it, and so I don't know. I
agree with all that. And then maybe some free commentary for the occasional umpire is what I'll say. I really try to resist that. There's sometimes it's a question. Where did that miss? It's a question. It's not a statement. I understand that you feel that missed. I want to know where that missed.
You're just putting voice to the question everyone has.
I do the question that I feel we all have, which is, where the hell did that miss? But yeah, I would really try to actually, as long as I'm on this, you will appreciate this. Robert, again, totally different domain, but I was years ago with the now defunct Oakland A's, now the Athletics of Oaklamento or whatever they are, but at an A's fan fest where they had the bullpen up there, and there was a woman there who, as asking a question, they kind of opening up the audience for questions, and she said, "Hey, my son is a pitcher in high school, and I find it to be really difficult to watch him pitch. It's very anxiety producing to watch him pitch," which, aside, it's extremely anxiety producing to watch your child pitch. Because what do we want for our children? We want them to ideally not fail. And if they do fail, we want them not to fail in public. Well, I've got some very bad news for you about pitching. Pitching is, when it is successful, it is the absence of public failure. So as a parent, it is very hard to watch your child pitch. But she said, it's very anxiety producing to watch, my child pitch, but your parents have obviously dealt with it for your entire professional career. And how do they deal with it? And then basically the entire bullpen is like, no, none of our parents are able to deal with it. They're all basically a wreck. Sean Doolittle said that his mother records all of his outings, but only watches the saves, which is an act of genius, I think. That is like, I'm just like, the bad stuff just didn't ever happen. I'm going to watch the good stuff. But one of the thing I thought was really interesting is Jesse Chavez, who's a journeyman pitcher who I love. This is a guy who throws heat and is like 160 pounds, and it's kind of amazing. And Jesse Chavez, okay, so you're a parent of a pitcher. That's interesting to know. Are there any other parents of pitchers, a bunch of people are kind of nodding along. He's like, can I ask you, may I make a request? Could you please never say just throw strikes? What do you think I'm up here doing? Out of curiosity. Like, and I remember thinking like, oh, I have definitely said just throw strikes. And I have said that for the last time in my life. But it was kind of an interesting insight into like how you can be valuable and look, I try to keep most of my commentary to the strike zone to myself. Okay. I really try to I try to make that my inside voice. But how as a parent, you can support someone doing something so outrageous at some level. And I mean, what are the pathways for that kind of support? And, Robert, what you're describing about your father is obviously follows swimming very closely, is following everything you're doing very closely, but has that right distance to be an enabler, you say?
Yep. Yeah, he supported and enabled, but he wasn't trying to necessarily tell me he wasn't giving me his analysis necessarily, unless I asked, then he would offer it. And I think even more than even saying like what it is that he thought he may have seen that I did wrong, it was how to remediate that, which he was really good. I mean, he would offer these things if I asked. If I didn't ask, he wouldn't offer. But I knew he always had it in there. So, when I thought I needed it, I would ask. He was always available. It's funny you touched on something else though, that I think is it's like it's intangible, but it's very serious. And it's one of the things that makes whether starting a company or being a D1 athlete really hard. And Eddie used to refer to swimming, and I think this is also the case with baseball, but more so as swimming. And you'll know why in a second. He referred to our sport as the naked evaluation.
Yeah.
One for the obvious reason, right? Like you're standing there basically naked in front of a packed stands. But the bigger, more important, the more profound reason is because when your hand touches that electronic pad at the end, the numbers show up on the electronic scoreboard and on the internet, and the whole world can see it, and there's no hiding. And that's also very much the case with the pitcher. And I mean,
oh yeah,
even when I watch a baseball game, I'm watching the pitcher most of the time. To be honest with you, you got a laser beam on you, really stressful, really, really stressful, and that takes its toll. For sure. It's
gotta be a spotlight that you are, and then the other kind of psychological challenge of that is it's a spotlight that's on you. And then it's every pitcher, even the best pitchers in the game, spend more of their time watching baseball than playing baseball. And
I believe it. Yeah.
So you because you're only being, even if you're an MLB starter, you're only being used every 5 days, right? So you've got to that's the other part of it. I have just is a wonder to me. But I think it just to be able, but then it's like, I know that there are people, obviously it does not bother me to present to a room of people that I've never seen before. Although I think, Adam, between us, I think we both agree that you still hold the record for presenting to the sheer largest number of people.
In the live,
live Java 1, 2007. Is that right?
Right about there. Yeah.
And the great thing about this podcast, Robert, is we are mentioning Adam's haircut for the second time. We there should be a separate time when we mention your haircut or decided lack of haircut during that era. It is a really it's really marvelous.
Yes.
It's a special time. But I think it's like you and I don't have any kind of, but there are plenty of people who would be. Frankly, my son honestly would be like, actually, I would much rather be on the mound than have to speak to this many people. And it's like, all right, we'll tell you what, I'll speak to the people, you go to the mound and we'll be happy because I did that.
Tell him about the time when I was coaching Little League and it was coach pitch and I had to pull myself out. I had to call it a reliever for myself. Yeah, it was brutal.
You made that long walk for yourself.
Exactly.
Wow. Did you jawbone yourself at all? Did you give the ball willingly, or how did that work?
I called in my assistant coach and just walked right to the car and left and never came back. No.
That is amazing. So as you're kind of going through, and I think also, Adam, also not for the first time, the Positive Coaching Alliance. I know we've pitched this before, but I just think of this like, Robert, this is kind of training that you do as presumably in many sports, but definitely this is, Adam, you and I both done it in the context of baseball, I think. But this is like training that I think every human being should go through. It's just very, in terms of how you're talking about, like, how do you engage with an athlete? And I think it generalizes too to like, how do you engage with someone who is doing something that you yourself are not doing? And we do have an investor who was a pitcher. And as we were kind of like, he was talking to me about a period ahead that was for Oxide that was going to be kind of perilous. And I mean, he was anxious about it. And I'm like, your anxiety, I understand your anxiety, but like, you have to like view me as like your starting pitcher. Like, what is the conversation you would have with your starting pitcher? Because the conversation you have with your starting pitcher is like, not just throw strikes. Like, that's actually not a productive conversation. Right. Or even worse, like, hey, I'm really worried you're not going to throw strikes today.
That's right. You might have self-doubt. And I think that self-doubt is very justified.
I just don't think you're going to find the zone at all today. I don't know. I'm just thinking about it. And also like that tightness in your elbow, I think that probably is something. Like, I think that is, you know what I mean? It's like, that is absolutely
not the right pep talk.
Not the right pep talk. But it was actually really helpful for him to hear that. He's like, oh, okay. Yeah. Right. I get that. And then, the kind of next time we had a conversation, we were kind of talking about it, this, upcoming, we had a lot that was going on. And he's just like, hey, right kid, right spot. I'm like, there you go. Right kid, right spot. That's it. That's the right, because it can be, you don't want to give someone doubts about themselves that they don't have,
that's a good point. Yeah.
And I think it's really hard to do that. And I think this is like good advice too, for venture capitalists, when you're funding a startup. I mean, you got this like shared belief, or should have this shared conviction that this kind of thing is possible. And you are in kind of this coaching role, or this. I mean, or almost like, a parental role. I'm trying to think, wait, what is the exact analog for an investor with a startup? But you're not the one that's in the arena, but you're supportive of enabling that.
It's sort of an advisory role, right? I mean, it should be if they're a good investor. I think they're there with some regularity, and they're welcome to be. Obviously, assuming they're welcome to be, they are advising on certain matters that are within their wheelhouse. I think, we had a lot of investors that just didn't contribute much beyond money, and that is one of the, like I was getting at yesterday. I was like, one of the big lessons I learned is like, find someone that, like you'd said, has deep convictions about what it is you're doing, and actually believes, not just, like, okay, that seems like that's good enough that I'd fund it, but like, no, like, you guys are going to change the world. Like, I have a lot of people say that like, that this may not work, but I have a healthy disregard for those kinds of opinions. I think there's a way to make this work. That's kind of, you want someone that's kind of on your team. They are sort of a coach. I agree with you. I think that's how it should be.
Well, they need to feel that conviction pretty deeply. And I will say that, like, because, and it's hard to assess that. Like, it's hard to assess who has got the conviction in me, in us, in the team. We've got, a good friend of my son's is in the great position of trying to assess right now multiple offers to play baseball. And how do you, and one of the things that and he's trying to figure out his own rubric for it. And one of the things that he wants to figure, he's like, where I want to go, where I'm going to be the best developed, and how do I kind of make that decision? How do I assess for conviction? And as I was kind of noodling this back and forth with them, I think that like one of the questions to ask is, where do you, investor, coach, where do you see the biggest gap? Where do you see the most room for development, the most need for development? What is the answer to that question? Like, I don't need the flattery. I want to know like where the gaps are. And, I think if we had, as I kind of think back to our own fundraising adventures, I think if we had actually asked that question to some of the firms that thought that were full of enthusiasm for Oxide but had no true conviction, I think they might have dropped out earlier. Because I think it would have been really, I think it would have been revealing. I want to, it's hard to replay history, but I think it would have been revealing that they didn't actually understand what we were doing. And they couldn't actually have conviction in us because they didn't actually understand it. And you need that conviction, because when things, just as an athlete too, you need the conviction, because otherwise when you hit the slump, I mean, you had said, you weren't, there was a period where you weren't swimming well, or when you got an injury, when something goes wrong, if somebody does not have that conviction, they'll abandon you. And
100%.
that is what you're looking for in a coach and an investor, is someone who's going to stand by you during those difficult times. And people say it, but they don't actually. It's very like, how do you assess that? And that's been what has been. I mean, we've been blessed with investors that have really, and you only see it at these moments that are kind of dire, where it's like, oh my God, thank God, this is why. I mean, you were great during, like, when things were going well, you were good, but like, now that we've had a kind of a moment of crisis, you're extraordinary.
Yeah, and ideally, those types are not like, okay, well, give me a call when you get through that. We'll go get lunch or something like that.
Totally.
Talk about the next bridge round, but they're there really thinking of ways to make this work. And that was one of they're one of your biggest supporters, ideally. And and I kind of got lucky, like with my coach in college, it's kind of the same thing. And I didn't even have to ask him. He led with it. He's like, he had very detailed, vivid, like explicit, like plans for how this was going to play out over the course of 5 years. He led. I didn't even get a chance to ask him. He's like, here's what we need to do, and here's what I see happening as a result. And it was, like I said,
I'm just dying to know what he could see. I mean, like, what made him so prescient? Or did he just, maybe this is like VC, where he's just like, no, I said it to everybody. It's just
yeah, right. He asked a lot of interesting questions, not just to me, but to my parents, and also to the coaches on my club team, which was one question he asked me was like, when did he go through puberty? When did it start? Like, what did he look like a year ago? These kinds of things.
Checking references.
It's funny. I used to joke with the father of one of my son's friends in high school, who is just a really well-developed guy. I'm like, if any coach comes here looking for Tobin, would you be his father for purposes of any discussion? Because I'm just worried if they look at me, they're just going to be like, nope. Okay. Yeah, that's a pass, hard pass.
Right? Is he adopted by any chance? Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, it could be. I'd be just maybe can we meet mom? I mean, we're just kind of holding out hope that there's the. But that's interesting. He was actually looking for a delayed development.
Oh yeah, that's his favorite.
Yeah,
he loved those guys.
Yeah, that's sure.
Yeah. Because you get
your penny stocks. Too. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Penny stocks. That's exactly how I think he viewed it. And I
am the penniest of penny stocks when it comes to timely arrival of pubescence. I really should have. I had a lot I could really go talk about then. Adam's like noting the time for like complete censorship.
I just like the idea of Tobin being like, Dad, why don't you come to the gym with me? I don't know. I thought we could work out together. And it's like, why is he so focused on me putting on some muscle mass?
That's right. Well, I'm just like, look, I'm trying to go somewhere. Okay. I need you. Everyone's got a role to play.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, what are the questions that he asked? So that's interesting.
He asked that, and then for the most part, he wanted to see me race. He wanted to see. He was doing things like counting my strokes during a race to see how many it took me to get to the other side.
Yeah, interesting. So looking at elements of mechanics, is now a good time to mention that you are an extraordinary sleight of hand magician? It feels like that we can't get all the way through this without at least mentioning that.
Oh yeah, in fact, that's a good segue. It's kind of it's different, but it's the same in a lot of ways. So I think that's a good point. And because you talked about how your son could stand on that mound and just fire those baseballs right down the middle all day long, but he may not feel comfortable speaking to a large crowd. But I just think it's just yet another instance of acquiring ability, and that's really the big thing that I think I learned at Texas that I use. I've applied it to almost everything I've done that I really want, that is. And, talk about it kind of a nerve-wracking experience. Like, Yeah, I'm definitely capable of some bastard hard sleight of hand maneuvers, but when you go like so, Adam, for those that don't know, like I'm a member of the Academy of Magical Arts in Hollywood, the Magic Castle. It's in L.A. And but to actually, and I would say it's probably the close up sleight of hand magic capital of the world. But in order to become a member, you have to audition, and you can't even get into this place unless a magician invites you or you're a member. So I auditioned for membership, and thankfully I passed. But I'm there performing in front of like centuries worth of expertise in this judges panel, and yeah, it was terrifying. But I kind of just
this
applied the
was
same
obviously
thing.
after your swimming career.
Yeah. This was something I kind of, it's something that's one of these things where I'm like, I've always wanted to do it, and I just never had the time, and just said, okay, you know what,
Do
I'm
you
gonna do it.
control time and space with your mind? It just doesn't feel like any like I mean I could not do that. I could not, it does not matter how much I want to put my mind to being a sleight of hand magician. Like these
You
hands
could.
are not doing that. They're just not. They're not cooperative. I just
Yes, they
my,
are.
my
Oh
hands
yes.
and I have a complicated relationship with one another. We're constantly like anyway.
Oh, it could be done for sure. I think you could do it. Yeah, you put in enough time, you could do it.
Huh.
It's just, yeah, but I believe in passive rehearsal, not active. So, for example, I don't set aside an hour or something like that and practice. I always had a deck of cards in my hands, and I'm just always kind of fiddling with it and working on some particular move. And once I have it, then move on. But it's almost more of a just something you kind of do all the time in the background. But yeah, I'm pretty sure you could do it too if you actually wanted to.
It should also be said that I mean, not hugely surprising given your aptitude in the pool. You've got larger hands than I do.
Maybe.
Adam, do you know what about? I think Adam's your guy. I think Adam could be a real talent.
I thought this is where this is going. Yes.
No, I think you could be a real talent. I think you got this is
Robert. When I've shaked Brian's hands, he refers to my hands as clown hands.
That only out of praise. You're making it sound so pejorative, and this is my own issue and my own like.
I've taken it to HR. They're like,
I've got these little doll hands. It's like, I mean,
you're holding your Diet Coke with two hands, so it doesn't slip.
Otherwise, I can't lift it. I need both of them here. It's, but it is amazing. I don't know if you've ever seen like close up magic, Adam, but it's so fun to watch, Robert. Yeah. I mean, I feel like, Robert, I'm sorry that I feel like we kind of trotted you out at every all hands. But like, no, we don't need to. It's fine. We don't need an off-site activity. Robert can just give a deck of cards.
Don't worry about the projections for Q4. Let's look at another magic trick.
For sure.
How about 3-card Monty?
For sure. Exactly. Yeah. That is remarkable though. And I really, again, I just admire the determination and drive. And now you can, maybe I could. Maybe I could make these little doll hands hide a thimble or two. I'm not sure what they would hide. There's just not a physical place to put it. That's what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, it's not that hard. You start small, you work your way up.
In some cases, you'd start small and stay small. I think it would be unimpressive. But
yeah, magic is yeah. It's there's this saying that we have where so like currently I'm at Google. When I started here, I was working on device drivers for the sensors that are in the Pixel Buds, and so we have like a touch sensor, we have infrared for like on-head detection, and we have IMU inside of both buds for spatial audio, so we can see like the pitch and the yaw of your head as you turn it. And so I'm going somewhere with this, but I would say I joined Google late in Google's history here, but and there've been a lot of different companies it's been a lot of different companies over the years for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But one of the things that I heard, kind of an older Googler say was that they used to have this thing, at least I don't know if they still do, but it was have a healthy disregard for the impossible. Like, just because everybody says it can't be done, it's like, oh, okay, I'll take that. I'll take that into advisement. I'll take that with a grain of salt, and I'm going to go out and try anyway, just to see, And I've always sort of applied that kind of mentality with anything you do. Just because you could be wrong, it's possible that it actually can be done. Everyone else said it couldn't, so you decide to believe them. And I mean, that's how I ended up submitting Texas. I didn't think he was going to answer me back. I just emailed him, right? And not to make you uncomfortable, Bryan. So everyone here knows, I was actually a huge fan of Bryan for years before I met him. I felt like I got to know Bryan through his comments in the Kernel. Especially Typegraph. There's some solid gems, vitriolic gems in there.
Bring it time for that.
Yeah, seriously.
dtrace.org, and then of course all the stuff that amazing, devilishly clever things that he left behind in the AKD in the analytics, just amazing. So I thought, like, this is this is still true. I don't know if you remember our first conversation, Bryan, on the phone. I had said, like, like my entire career, ever since I was a computer scientist, there were two people I wanted to meet in my career. I mean, I could meet more, that'd be great, but like at least these two. And I said, sadly, I can't meet one because he's dead. And that was Tenacity, but you were the other. And it was a little surreal even being on the phone with you because having known how much you've done and how busy you are. I'm just a regular software engineer, but I said, why not talk to this guy? Maybe he'll answer, maybe he will. And he did, so it's
so
crazy.
What I remember that conversation for whatever it's worth is you always get a little bit like fidgety when, it's very, very flattering. But I don't kind of think I'm worthy of the August company. But then you begin to recite block comments from memory. That I had forgotten, and I'm like, okay, this is a person who spent a lot of time in code that I've written, and I'm just very sorry, just in general. I always feel like let's get the apologies out early.
Nothing. Oh man, you inspired me. You made me excited about software in a way that I hadn't been before. I remember you telling me you kind of felt like, I remember you saying, I've never really kind of walked away from a project feeling like it wasn't 100%. I've always felt like things were 100% done. I remember you telling me you didn't feel like this was 100% done in your mind.
Yes, that's definitely true. And I felt like I was leaving behind time bombs for people that happened to be you. So, don't you feel that way? I feel like we were not done.
About Fishworks? Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, even the name of it, like we called it the appliance kit. And we're like, it wasn't to build a storage product. It was to build like a whole vast line of world conquering products.
And I felt like I can't like transmit across space and time. Like I was going to rewrite that, by the way. That thing that you're in, I also know that it needs to be rewritten, and I'm really sorry.
You talk about analytics. You talking about the?
Listen, fine. I was ready for
this. Seen the 1 second time quantum, and we're
okay. I knew the praise was.
We get to the airing of grievances.
Exactly. I knew the praise was suspicious.
It's not.
I knew that this is okay. This is warming me up for the actual like dagger. Okay, pal. Let's talk about AK.
What was it that I'm trying to remember? Somebody had made an interesting comment out of frustration at work the other day, talking about some API that just made no sense, and that it's not fair that the people that make these things don't have to use them. And it totally reminded me of something that Bryan had said, like, it was like this long rant about, well, I'm trying to think, I think it was the Doors API. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was something like, but we wouldn't have these problems if the cloistered jackasses that made these things had to use them now and again.
That is a quote from a comment, yes, that I no longer have. That's not open source. That's from AKD.
Wow.
Beautiful.
This is the kind of thing where someone would be looking at this comment that says like cloistered jackasses, for example. Like, look, I know myself well enough to know that like if someone is upset about a comment that says the words "cloister jackasses," we all know who wrote it. I mean,
actually, you ready? I think I have it.
do you really? You got the full comment?
If this thread is going to be serving RPC, we want to increase the stack size by the maximum RPC size plus the maximum RPC response size. This allows a maximum sized RPC and a maximum sized RPC response to both be copied onto the stack. Why must these be on the stack? A reasonable person might ask. The reason is yet another ill-conceived notion of door servers. It requires that both input to and output from a door server be on the serving thread's stack. There is no way for a door server to specify either an alternate input buffer or an alternate output buffer. That doors is busted is hardly breaking news, but in a new twist, it sends us on a collision course with API brokenness elsewhere. One might think that we could get the default stack size by doing a pthread adder init followed by a pthread adder get stack size. That, however, would assume that the cloistered jackasses who specify these APIs actually try to use them now and again. This assumption is, of course, false, and a pthread adder get stack size on a newly initialized pthread adder T returns not the true stack size, but rather the cheerfully inept value of null. So we are instead forced to hard code our own slop value, hoping that the value is a reasonable one from platform to platform. So thanks for nothing, POSIX, and go to hell, doors.
Bravo.
I feel I need my lawyer. I like my lawyer. My lawyer is advising me to have
this like from a Unix POSIX poetry slam.
It is. It's very poetic, right? It's beautiful.
It is.
But
I'm impressed that you got that.
I love these. So say that again.
I'm impressed that you got that. However you got it, I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to ask any follow-up questions where you might need your own lawyer. But I'm glad that you got that whole. I'm glad you got that blog comment. I remember where I was when I wrote that blog comment. That is as you. I mean, not surprisingly,
it was Caltrain. You had to have been on like Caltrain, right? At a certain stop.
You are so close. No, I was in Adam. You know where I was? I was in the office of MetaWeb.
Oh
no,
nice. Yeah.
MetaWeb later bought by Google, right?
Wasn't
that the Data Lewis thing? They were doing like a whole like semantic web thing when the semantic web seemed like that seemed like chasing windmills.
Yeah,
and then but importantly, they had a ping pong table, and this is where another odyssey begins.
Wow,
it's true.
And I want to play Michael Phelps in fish pong. That's how I want to. That's the other thing I want to get out there. If I were to beat Michael Phelps in fish pong, I would never qualify it. I would just say I have beaten Michael Phelps. The end. No,
put it on the list for the Oxide IPO. I mean, I feel like it's
IPO.
Destiny. Yeah,
that's it. Robert, it is so great. Thank you very much for joining us. This is great. I was so glad to see your reaction to my piece. I was glad that I wasn't at least totally off the mark.
You were spot on, man. It was eerie.
And I just think it's also like it's just a good reminder about how like this kind of period of life that you have of coming into adulthood. You're learning so many different things in so many different ways, and I know for like especially for non-Americans are very confused why we have athletics associated with our institutions of higher education. But despite all the NCAA's problems, I do believe that it's a big part of one's education. So there's a bunch of lessons that are not in the classroom that are being learned in the swimming pool or on the diamond.
Yeah, for sure. And just like one last sort of like story to corroborate what you're saying. And there's actually this is another conversation that happened between you and I, which you may or may not remember, but like I had said, one of the things I always loved about reading whether it was your comments in the code or whether it was an evaluation for a bug that you had closed or root caused or remediated was like it was like it'd be something that was really insanely difficult and it would all of a sudden you just see like boom, you would just see this evaluation in there. And I said, never seen anybody just jump from A to like Z without having to go through like B, C, D, E, F, G, and it just seemed brilliant. And you had said, see, that's the thing. Like, What you didn't see was the number of dead ends that I went down first before I arrived there. People see the finished product and they're like, this guy's a genius. And you probably are, but it doesn't change the fact that there was a lot that went into that to make it what it was. And people don't see that. And it's also the case, I think, with sports, definitely the case with being an entrepreneur, man. You guys,
and in sleight of hand too. Like, in fact, I've actually called that sleight of hand. I think it's actually I tried not to do that. I used to kind of like to do that when I was younger, of like, ta-da. And now I'm like, no, that's actually not helpful, because people don't see all these elements of the process and they think like, I can't do that. It's like, no, sorry. I'm sorry. Please excuse my showmanship. I actually went through all sorts of dead ends and was grinding through them.
That's right. And maybe you said what it takes is freaking tenacity. And I think that's the case in our line of work, and also in being an athlete. It just takes tenacity and conviction and grit.
That's it.
Yeah.
That is it. Well, Robert, thank you again for joining us. This is great. Great to hear your voice. Great to reminisce. Great to hear my blog comments be read back to me in a dramatic fashion. I have to say, I kind of like this. I feel like we can, I don't know, it feels like it should be a regular feature. We can blog comments.
Yeah. We'll see. That's a good idea.
I don't know if I'm, Bryan, I don't know if I'm tipping my hand too much when I say this, but there may be more where that came from. And I'm not even talking about the one I have memorized, which is the one where you go off on glue huffing, pro coding teenagers. You remember that? I don't know if you remember that one. That was a good one too. That was one of my favorites. What is it? Indeed, it reminds one of a reeking metropolis like Lagos or Nairobi, having long since outgrown its original design, such as there was one. It is now crippled and teeming with sewage, and vigilantes run amok. And yet the masses still come, not because it's utopia. No. They come because this dystopia is marginally better than the only alternatives they know. And in an attempt to prevent roaming gangs of glue-huffing, pro-coding teenagers from staging raids on my comments above, while I acknowledge that there is a way to do what I'm saying, there's also a way to live like a king in Lagos or Nairobi, but that doesn't make them tourist destinations.
Yeah.
And by the way, that actually is something I just never forgot. That was just
that is from memory. That is that may be a comment in some Perl code, actually. I believe that has to do with the way that Perl deals with exceptions, I believe is what I'm commenting on.
That's the one. Yep.
That was very good. Well, that was brilliant. My part of that wasn't brilliant. Your part of that was brilliant. My part of that was just very frustrated, I think.
Hopefully you guys don't think I'm crazy now. You might. That's okay.
Well, thank you again. This has been really terrific. It's been really fun to hear about. You're really extraordinary Cinderella story, and it's inspirational in terms of that the resilience that we can all tap. And I'm going to go try to do some sleight of hand magic. I'm going to see who put these doll hands to work. Is what I got to say. So.
Seriously.
Well, if you ever do decide, I would recommend Card College Volume 1. That's going to be easy.
Card College Volume 1, Books in the Box 5. All right. On it.
That's right.
Awesome. Thank you again, Robert. Thank you everyone as
always. Real pleasure. Sometime I'll come up and perform for you guys when you're having an event or something. That would be really fun.
Oh, yes. Oh, we need to do like an Oxide Friends event up here. We can have Robert perform.
That sounds great.
Yeah. We'll do it. Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you next time.